Excuses. We've all used them at one point in our life, I'm sure. I know I have. What are some excuses that you have either heard or used at some point in your life? Anybody had a good one? When they're in that?
I didn't have time.
I didn't have time. I forgot. I was tired. Too busy. Lost track of time.
Had to go to church.
Had to go to church. That's a good one. My cat died. Dog ate my homework. Yeah. All kinds of excuses. We're a very creative group of people. Now, telling the truth is usually a better way to go, but sometimes a well-crafted excuse can come in handy. I think we can use an excuse from time to time, whether it's putting off the boss off our tail for a while, trying to spare the feelings of a friend or loved one, or just needing a day off and not really being sick and having to call in and say, I'm sick today. So today and next week I'm going to be preaching from two passages from Luke's Gospel that talk about what it takes to follow Jesus. And in church speak, the topic that I'm referring to is discipleship. If you grew up in a church like John and me, you heard that from the beginning. To be a disciple, to be a follower of Jesus. And that's a scary word. It scared me when I was a kid, trying to figure out what it meant to be the person I was and how to be a Christian. Now, I grew up in an evangelical church, evangelical covenant church, which, by the way, just excluded a congregation from the denomination for being LGBTQ affirming. So I'm very saddened by that. But in that church, they believed strongly in sharing God's good news, both close at home and far away. And so we would very often have missionaries come and show their slides, because that's all we had back then. You remember slides, right? All the old people are yes, the young people are no. And they would show these pictures of the work that they did in faraway places and the poverty that they did and the church that they formed. And very much like our own, Trudy and Ray, who are in the Dominican Republic right now. They're missionaries. They're working to build a church and to build a school. And so I began to associate that kind of commitment with discipleship, or leading a church, or being a pastor. And so I resisted it for a very long time. And as it turns out, God has a real good sense of humor. God gave me that calling later on in life to take a big step and to do something big, like being a pastor and leading a church. So as my understanding of Christianity grew and I experienced God in new ways, I came to see that following Jesus does not always require big and difficult things. Sometimes it does, but most of the time, 99.99% of the time, following this Jesus character requires many small and seemingly insignificant things. And when you really put all of this Christianity into practice, it's those many small things that are actually harder to do than the big things. Sometimes it's harder to do those because they take our attention. They demand our attention. They demand our awareness. It demands that we be awake. And sometimes just a good excuse is just a little bit easier. There's an old saying, I guess today it would be called a meme, that goes, there was a job that never got done because everybody thought someone else would do it, so this job that anybody could do went unfinished because nobody took the time to care and to notice. And that happens all the time. There's always things that can be accomplished that don't because people don't notice. And so today we're going to look at some of those small, simple things that anybody can do that form the bedrock of a life spent following Jesus into our world. Neil, can you turn my volume down just a little bit? I'm echoing a little too much. Thank you. So our gospel reading marks a significant change for Jesus. And the chapters just before this one that we read today, we're reading about his teachings, we're reading about his miracles, and we're reading about life on the road with 12 disciples and a bevy of followers. And so then we have this change. It says he gathered up his courage and steeled himself for the journey to Jerusalem. Other translations read, he set his face towards Jerusalem. In other words, he made up his mind, I'm going, and this is the direction that we're going to take. And he knew that in entering that city would mean being captured and tortured and executed. But here he makes up his mind that it's time to do this really, really big thing that he was meant to do. And right away they face opposition. He sends out some people ahead, and they come to a Samaritan town, and that town hears that he's on his way to Jerusalem and say, no, we don't want you here. We don't want you to stay. And the two hot-headed disciples, James and John, they say, hey, Jesus, you want us to throw down a lightning bolt and incinerate that city for you? We'll do it. And, oh my gosh, wouldn't that be great if we could do that? Oh, if being a Christian meant we could throw down lightning bolts, it'd be really scary driving in traffic, though. You cut me off, boom! You're sitting at the red light, boom! Unfortunately, we can't do that. It would be tempting. And it would be totally cool, too. But Jesus says no. And he says the better way is to go around. Meeting opposition or violence with more violence is never the way to go. It's a lesson that we need to hear and heed, especially in our days today. So, there are many ways right now in our current climate that the core values of the Christian tradition, such as justice and mercy and kindness and compassion and basic human love, are either being undone or ignored. And it would be great to wipe out the opposition, but that's not the way that this man, this Jesus, taught and teaches. Instead, that is the way of tyrants and the way of this world. And Jesus shows a different way. So he goes on, and someone comes along and says, I'll follow you. And he says, it's not going to be a walk in the park. And we don't hear about that person anymore. And then someone else comes along, and that person gives the excuse of needing to take care of important business at home. And Jesus responds that the business of life, capital L, is more important than the business of worldly existence. In other words, that there's something more and bigger that's going on here that demands our time and attention. And then this third person comes along who's ready and willing to join him, but first he wants to go home and set things right. And he says, no procrastination, no backward look. You can't put God's kingdom off till tomorrow. Seize the day. Now, how do we do that? What does it look like in everyday terms to follow this discipline of Jesus? Before we approach that question, there's a bigger question that I think we need to answer. And that's, why am I here? Why are we here? And there's lots and lots of different answers to that. We're here to evolve, to grow, to change, to care for the earth, to care for one another. And you can come up with all kinds of theories about why we're here, about why you're here. What's your reason, your purpose for being on this planet? And I think all of that is encapsulated in this concept of love. I think we are here to love. It doesn't need to be that complicated. Now, I don't know if that's the actual reason that we're here. I don't pretend to know God. But it's a good theory to work with. And it is certainly something that our world needs more of. We need to learn how to love ourselves, which is one of the hardest things to do. Amen? We need to learn how to love each other, even those that are different, and those that oppose us, and those that exclude us. We need to learn how to love the earth and love the creation. We need love. We need to expand our experience of one another. We need to expand and grow, and that's what love does. Now, love is an emotion, but it's also a choice. It's a choice that you make. I choose to love French fries. I love them a lot. I choose to love my dog. I choose to love my partner. And every morning you get up, you may not make a conscious choice if you're with someone or have somebody important in your life. You may not actually go through this thought process. But in every single second of every single day, you have the choice, the opportunity to go somewhere else. And yet you choose to stay with that person or stay where you are, do what you do. It's in the moment when we're free, when we're open. when action happens. And so when we love, we are choosing to do something that is loving towards the object of whatever it is we're loving. And so this idea of following Jesus is about being in that moment and being aware that I can do something loving here, or I can do something not so loving here. What am I going to choose to do? When I marry somebody, I very often quote from 1 Corinthians 13. Love is patient. Jesus, did you really have to start out with that one? Oh my, that's another sermon. I'll just let that one go for now. We'll deal with that later. Love is kind. Love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It doesn't insist on its own way. It's not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but it rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. So these are the qualities that love has and when it is lived out. And so these are the choices we have to make in the moment when we have them. If we're going to seize the day, seize the moment, and not make an excuse, these are the things that we show. Kindness, humility, mercy, compassion, and justice. It's not easy. Because we go through life headstrong, blinders on, what's the next thing, get it done. We have to stop and slow down. And mindfulness, being mindful of what we're thinking and what we're doing, because that's the place of power and the place of change. Right here, right now, in this moment. No excuses. What is the most loving thing you can do for yourself, for the other person, for the creation, for God, for all of it? Let us seize the day as best we can. Would you pray with me? Holy and loving God, we thank you that you give us this opportunity to be love in this world, to manifest your love. And we are grateful that this idea of love is expanding and growing. And we are becoming more compassionate, even though it's hard. Help us in each moment to be that presence, your presence in this world, your love. We pray in the name of Jesus. Amen.